AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Our host, Mark Kelly, brings you the leading minds in AI, sharing their story, their success, and their advice. Focusing on fast-tracking you to the top, AI in Action cuts through the hype to help you kickstart your data science career. To listen to the latest AI in Action podcast, head over to www.alldus.com/podcast or subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Podcasts.
Hello, my name is Mark Kelly. Welcome to the Alldus podcast. I'm the Chief Customer Officer at the Alldus International. Today's podcast is part of our AI in Action series. I'm delighted to welcome Vladyslav Prytula. He is the Head of Applied Data Science at Zooplus. Vladyslav, fantastic to have you on the show today.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me.
So Vladyslav, before we jump into the work that you're doing at Zooplus, tell us a little bit about background about you, because I know you've lived in a few different locations.
So actually, by my background, I came from very theoretical background. So I do have a PhD in applied mathematics. And before going to the industry, I was working in France, in Norway, in Spain, etc., doing mostly functional analysis and some free boundary simulations. But then around 10 years ago, I actually moved to the industry, and again, there was quite a lot of travel involved. So I went back to my home country, Ukraine, there I worked for some startups which are currently acquired by Oracle, technical project manager as a business analyst, and I was consulting for US companies for payment B2B providers in US. Then I actually ended up in Credit Suisse in Poland. And after that, actually realizing that in general, my passion still lives with math, but with applied mathematics and with just like preferring to see the results of what you do live. So I actually moved to Munich and went directly to the applied data science position. At that time, that was the startup from Firefox, which didn't work out very well because we were trying to compete with Google, trying to make search specified in German location. And then actually 3 years ago, I was lucky to join Zooplus. So Zooplus is pretty big retail. It's actually the biggest pet-related retailer in Europe. So the overall amount of revenue was exceeding 1.8 billion or something a year. And yeah, I initially 3 years ago joined as a product manager for search and recommendation, but had a luck to be able to prototype an internal search recommendation. It was a very nice experience.
So Vladyslav, so you're from Ukraine. You've worked in Spain, France, Norway, Poland, and Germany. You've got a postdoc in applied mathematics. So you've really traveled around while actually working in different types of environments. Zooplus, you mentioned close to 2 billion in sales, significant growth year on year, 39 shops, and is a leading online pet retailer in the EU. Tell us a little about the journey of starting the data science function.
So yes, as you said, the Zooplus is growing quite fast. So it's again more than 14% of growth year to year. And it actually still, while being a big company, it still allows to certain teams or to certain individuals who want to work in a more of an entrepreneurial way of working to actually do their own stuff and prototype and see whether there is an effect on the market or not. So when I moved into the data science position, so it wasn't the head position at that time, that was more like, a lead data scientist. Most of the data related work at Zooplus was a classical structured data analysis but from the business side, there was a big push in towards being able to first personalize the user experience and then bridge that personalized user experience with actual business goals. When around 2.5 years ago, actually, we started this internal recommendation search project. We were just 3 people at that time. It was me, one developer, and one junior product owner who was actually helping from the business. And we had the luxury to be able to build everything from the scratch. And I think that it really matters, especially when you work in the company which are big, because sometimes you're forced into working with legacy applications, and sometimes it's just very difficult to find out a way out. And we had a luxury to be able to build something from scratch, deploy it to production. We were going from one shop to the other, so it wasn't, of course, a big deployment once at a time. We were always collecting the feedback with respect to business metrics and user engagement metrics. And actually, we were reiterating quite a lot because, again, the team still is quite small. So we're around 10 people now, which is a fully cross-functional team. So we have developers, we do have data scientists. They're all working together, so it's not separated worlds, which you sometimes might witness in the companies when data scientists do the data science thing and developers do the developers thing, and they don't interact with each other. Here, they are all very tightly interoperating between themselves. And I think this also brings the ability to deliver something which is business critical quite fast. So the way how we actually managed to move from one shop, and as you rightfully said, we are operating in 39 shops overall, is that initially we actually deployed only to a small portion, just to one shop, and only in the mobile app. And then learning from there, we were actually able to have a hard proof in numbers that the thing that we're doing actually works. And then we expanded to several smaller shops. Then we again measured, we again compared to the previously existing solution. And then we actually moved to the bigger markets like Germany. So that's in short how we, in the end, ended up everywhere.
You're listening to the Alldus podcast. When you're looking to scale your team, if you're interested in showcasing your company in a future episode, reach out today. Or if you're in the market for a new role, visit our website to view open positions, www.alldus.com. When you look at the data science projects you're undertaking, please tell us maybe some kind of novice examples about how you're using reinforcement learning or applying different vector models, clustering.
That's a great question. Actually, so again, there is an important thing that we try to balance the complexity of the model with the effect on the business. But reinforcement learning is really an interesting topic, and it's usually not being used that much in the industries of now. You can find the reinforcement learning system playing Go and so on, but in the industry, I think we're one of the very few. So actually, the way how we're doing is that first we're automatizing our A/B tests. So we do have some reinforcement learning feedback cycles and machine learning models on top of that would actually do hyperparameter tuning of our algorithms, getting the feedback from the real usage. So this is basically, in machine learning terms, a bit more complex way of usage bandits. It is such an algorithm and one of the basic algorithms of reinforcement learning. The other thing that we are doing in terms of reinforcement learning is that we also try to learn what actually the variant that we want to show to the user, because so the standard algorithms which are usually widely deployed in recommendation systems, they are user-to-user interactions or some sequence models. But we also have in our SKUs, we have like huge variety. Like, for example, it could be the food of 1 kilo, could be the food of 12 kilo, but it's going to be the same food basically. And the important thing is actually to recommend the correct variant to the user. And we're also doing that automatically. So we're doing it through exploitation. So we start with recommending something which is suitable for the user, but generic for the whole population. And then by exploding and sometimes exploring, we actually converge to the variants which are correct for the user. What else interesting we're using? So we're also trying to solve the problem. So in recommendation engine, one of the problems which you typically would encounter when you start is the well-known cold start problem. So when you don't know anything about the user or you don't have enough statistics. And here we are actually trying to learn from just pure user interaction on the website. So without effectively looking back at the previous history, because sometimes there might be just no purchasing or interaction history. And in this case, we are actually applying the models which are typically used in natural language processing. So we're considering the user interaction with the site as a sort of a sentence from the user or a paragraph. And then we apply basically a sentence. So we build a sentence embeddings, which come from natural language processing. We build deep sentence representations, and then we use that user-specific sentence representation to find the close users which are similar to that user. And this allows us to dynamically do, let's say, user cohorting. So it's an online learning of cohorts through deep representations. I think those are perhaps two of the most fanciest techniques that we use.
Thank you for that. Tell us a little bit about the impact of COVID.
COVID had a tremendous impact on our society and also on the businesses. So we are a pure online business. So of course, the amount of customers, the amount of interactions with the site, it grew tremendously when the pandemic started, and it continued to grow. So there was and it still goes. So there is a very important shift from trying to acquire new customers and actually directing resources and algorithmic targets towards acquiring new users. We actually shifted heavily into retaining. So the important thing now is to retain the users. This is from the user perspective. Of course, from our internal company perspective, COVID also had a great impact. We actually already, before the COVID, used to work quite a lot remotely. And for example, my team is completely distributed. So we have people in Madrid, we have people in Krakow, we have people in Munich. So there was not that big change in the way how we communicate and how we work, but still, of course, there is certain toll to bear. For example, you don't go for beers that frequently anymore, or you don't go at all. Yeah, so perhaps that's from the outside.
Thank you for that. Probably my final question would be, what advice would you offer to your younger self starting on this journey? Because you've made it sound relatively straightforward, but I'm guessing it wasn't like that always.
No, it wasn't definitely that way always. And it involved quite a lot of wiggling around. And so my advice would be, first, you have to be prepared that whatever you plan ahead, you still will have to correct your plans all the time. And from the machine learning perspective, from the data science perspective, what I would say, and it might sound quite obvious, but don't invest into super complex model right from the start. So initially, you might have quite a significant impact on the business with pretty simple models. Of course, as you develop, as your system grows, it becomes much more complex. And more complex, you will hit the wall when you can't really be done with simple models, and you have to go into deep learning, you have to go into some kind of heavy data mining. But right from the start, in order to be able to get feedback as fast as possible and to be able to understand and actually also to have a baseline, I think it's better to start with something simple and then evolve from there. And maybe because I also come from academia, I sometimes had that issue. So I wanted to implement right from the scratch, or my team also wants to, some bleeding edge model which you just read in a paper. And again, it's fun and you will be there. But to start with, try to make it simple.
So start small, evolve, grow it out, have that kind of POC, MVP, get this buy-in from senior management, and then start to generate the wins and build from there.
Exactly.
You know, it sounds like a good approach, because when you look at data science, a lot of people can actually start too big, work on a problem that isn't that impactful if it's solved, and stakeholder buy-in can quickly wane, not to mention culture can be a bit of a drag as well, because people aren't feel like they're making the impact they love to do, and people want to make an impact, and you're managing expectations really well. Vladyslav Prytula, Head of Applied Data Science at Zooplus, thank you very much for being on our show.
Thank you. That was a pleasure.
You are listening to the Alldus podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kelly, Chief Customer Officer at Alldus International. In today's podcast on AI in Action, we got speaking to Vladyslav Prytula, Head of Applied Data Science at Zooplus. Vladyslav gave us a little bit of an overview about his background from working in Ukraine, Spain, France, Norway, Poland, to most recently in Munich, Germany. And we were talking about Zooplus and how they've got over close to 2 billion in sales, large growth, and how they've actually expanded online. We were talking about how the data science function evolved, how it grew, and some of the projects that are being undertaken at Zooplus as well. The impact of COVID, and then Vlad finished off and gave us his advice to his younger self on starting on a journey that he went on. If you're interested in finding out a little bit more about additional podcasts, please head over to www.alldus.com/podcast. And we'd love if you could rate and review this podcast. Until next time, thank you very much for your time for listening. See you then. Bye.
AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Alldus offer an exec search program. Alldus can help you discover how data science and AI can transform your company. With our unrivaled network of C-suite executives and senior AI professionals, we offer retained search services across the US and Europe. For more information, contact mark@alldus.com. Get the Alldus advantage. Become a member of the Alldus community and enjoy some of the following: AI meetups. Once a month, our community gathers to listen to some of the leading experts in the world of data science and AI. Our speakers come from all over the world, including Dublin, Boston, and Frankfurt. We also have our AI mentors. Our experts will provide mentoring to Alldus members. And don't forget our AI in Action podcast. Each week we have guests from all over the world talking us through their education, career, and more. Become an Alldus member and get the Alldus advantage. For more information and to sign up for our newsletter, log on to www.alldus.com. That's www.alldus.com. Alldus International, empowering through AI.